It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill. And today we are going to talk about training for function versus physique. So I feel like everyone's goal is always weight loss and changing their body, but we're never really focusing on function and health and how we're training. A lot of times we're just training to burn calories in the gym or with workouts. And we're going to tell you why your head is in the wrong place and your focus is in the wrong place and how you can have both things and feel good and move well and function well and have the physique that you have been chasing and probably get it even more easily by shifting your focus to this.
Yes. So, and we'll kind of wrap up by sharing with you my ideal way of programming to be able to kind of like incorporate both into your regular lifting regimen. So you hear us all day long talking about following effective lifting programs and progressively overloading, right? Like that is what we preach every single day. It's because the more muscle mass you put on your body, the more calories you burn all the time, the healthier you are metabolically, all the things. More muscle equals better, right? So think like a bodybuilding style or powerlifting style program. Now, my beef with bodybuilding style programming, and I used to train that way, by the way, is that if we only focus on overloading and stressing the muscle itself, but we don't focus on practicing movement patterns, you could look really, really good and have a lot of chronic aches and pains or lack function when you're just doing your day-to-day stuff, be more vulnerable to injury, all of that kind of thing. So, in addition to just putting on muscle, we want to think about movement patterns. So a lot of times we'll talk about like the big 5 lifts, or just the way that our body moves, right? We squat, we hinge, which you think of as like a deadlift. You're pushing your hips back. We push, we pull, we can move our hands overhead, our trunks rotate, right? There's all these different ways that our body moves in real life. We want to practice doing those movements really, really well. So for example, we just had this is very common, but we just had a new client who just started and she's like, these lifts that you program me are too easy, this and that. I've been lifting for a long time. And I'm like, okay, but here's why I'm programming this way your first month is because I want to spend our first 5 weeks together just really improving range of motion, learning how to really connect with the muscles that most people struggle with, improving your posture, because then when I go and I load you heavy, you're going to move so much better and you're actually going to be able to handle more weight. And you're going to be able to maintain those ranges of motion also versus thinking like, oh, I'm achy. Now I need a Theragun and now I need to stretch after every single night because my body hurts. It's like if you can practice moving well and train your body to access these deeper ranges of motion and end ranges, you will then be able to maintain it fairly easy. So that's kind of how we train. How you move matters, not just checking the boxes and going through the motions and saying, well, I did my 12 squats. Now I'm going to do my next set. It's like, can we make every rep a little bit better every time we are lifting? Can we get a little bit deeper? Can I engage my core a little bit better? Am I able to feel that the stretch in my glutes at the bottom of that movement? Or am I just squatting because, okay, my workout plan says I need to squat 12 times, right? There's a big difference in the outcomes that you can get, not just physique-wise, also physique-wise, but function-wise. So that is kind of the gist of our whole episode today. And then we wanted to kind of get into this in terms of like, okay, how do I fix it though? Because like a lot of times I think people know like my squat isn't that good, but okay, what do I do? Right? Like, so we kind of want to get into some of that. I don't know, Jill, do you want to talk a little bit about
Mobility.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely guilty of, back in the day, I went to Orange Theory, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, where I absolutely went in to compete for splat points and even being more like conditioned than the next person, where it's a newer stimulus for them and they were burning more calories and the splat points or whatever they're called were easier for them to get than me. I would still push competitively. So I don't belong in those spaces. That's why I don't belong in CrossFit classes or anything like that either, because I will kill myself just to prove a point and be the best, because that's how my brain works. But I absolutely went to those classes for the sake of sweating and feeling the burn and seeing what my, Fitbit said calories were burned, and I used to eat calories back, like just working out for the sake of like working out. And it really didn't happen until like, I'm about to be 33 years old. It really didn't happen until my late 20s that I shifted away from just aesthetic type of focus in my training to function and making sure that I'm aging well and moving well in the long run. I previously had a career in ultrasound, and I throw my back out all the time. And I was like, I'm not old. Like, how am I like throwing my back out by like reaching to close a drawer? Like just the silliest little things. And we tend to, like a lot of things, chalk it up to aging and like it's just the way things go. And it's not the case at all. I just was going to the gym with my bodybuilding history and hitting shoulders and lifting as heavy as I could because that's just what my brain, like that's what I learned and that's what I knew. And that was my focus. And it wasn't until I started to shift my programming to function. Now, it doesn't mean I don't still have a preferred way to train, but I know the reason why, and I make sure that I'm moving well, and I make sure that I am programming effectively in terms of focusing on different things. I actually am starting a new program that's very function, mobility focused and more performance focused than it is strength or aesthetics at all. I always sprinkle a little bit of aesthetics in. But anyway, the point is that when you optimize something like Jess said with your squat form, when you have someone instruct you how to squat correctly and what cues you should follow and where you should feel the movement, you will realize, and this is a lesson that I learned the hard way, it wasn't more weight that I needed. I just wasn't doing it right. And I can feel a squat so much more and get so much more out of it without having to load the bar to crazy numbers because I am training effectively and I am moving through the movement the way that it's intended to be moved through. So I just
And every rep still,
yeah.
And every rep still feels very hard. So if she's working in a 10 to 12 rep range, for example, her 10 to 12 reps, she still can't get 13 or 14 reps because it's that challenging when she's focusing on the right form and the right cues. It's not just knocking it out with lesser weight, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I also, you just jogged my memory about something else too, when you said like, people a lot of times will say like, oh, well, it's just because I'm getting older. Like pain is normal. Lacking mobility, flexibility is normal as you get older. I've also heard, and I think this is a little bit of an outdated concept, but I've also heard some of my clients in their 60s and 70s talk about this concept of being muscle bound. Like they think that if you train like a bodybuilder, you now are going to be stuck and not mobile. And now there's a lot of research that that's not the case. It's because they haven't been training in those full ranges of motion. That's why they're stuck. It's not because more muscle makes you less flexible. Which is why now like professional football teams will have their guys do yoga classes and stuff because then they're able to get more mobile also. So muscle does not make you less mobile. You just need to also practice mobility along with your strength training. So I guess in terms of the order of things, if you feel that you are lacking in some sort of movement pattern that we just talked about, those big 5 movement patterns, first we want to do some sort of isolated, like specific mobility practice for that spot. So like a lot of times if somebody's, and we would be able to assess this when we do our Zoom form calls with clients, we're able to assess it. Where is the limitation actually coming from? But let's say somebody really struggles to get lower on their squats. Oftentimes there's some sort of mobility lacking in the hips or in the ankles. So we're going to assess each of those joints. Once we figure out what it is, now we are creating a specific mobility plan for that joint or that area that person is kind of stuck in. Now, when I say mobility, I want to be clear, mobility does not equal flexibility. So we are not just putting them in static stretches, which is what I did. I always thought that was what you were supposed to do before sports practices, right? That. They just have you like reach down and touch your toes and just hang out there for a little bit. Mobility is an active, intentional movement where you're training your brain and your muscle to connect to work a little bit beyond where it was able to work before. The most common areas that I see in the general population are scapular mobility, the ability to pull your shoulder blades down and back. Oftentimes we turn into this forward round shrug.
Computer jobs.
Computer jobs do that, and they also end up putting our hips in this kind of posterior tilt position because our hip flexors are real tight in the front because we're used to sitting all day long. So usually the ones that are most common are some sort of shoulder or scapular mobility issues, hip tightness, and I do see a lot of ankle mobility stuff where people try to squat and then their shins hurt. So those three tend to be normal, like common ones. If you want to just go start there. Again, if you can get more specific, then what you want to do is actively practice those mobility movements before your lift. But you can also do it like random nights. When I was first working on improving my squat, I would do it like watching Netflix at night. I would go ahead and do my 90-90 practices or different pigeon poses. So you want to first practice the specifics. Again, when I say do it before your lifts, it's because if you can use it as a tool before going into your workout, then when you're in that workout, you're able to access a deeper range of motion. And then someday you don't need to do these specific warm-ups anymore. Now you can just continue to maintain that movement doing the actual move. Okay. So again, I'm using my squat as an example. I used to have a really tough time squatting with a barbell on my back because of my hip mobility. I did these 90-90 different exercises with intention, not just passively stretching. I did a bunch of pigeon pose exercises. I did very high controlled step ups and deficit lunges and stuff. Now I can get really deep on a squat. I'm always going to practice getting deep on a squat a couple times a week usually, but I don't need to now do all those other things because I can maintain it with my normal lifting routine because I'm able to access a full range of motion. So I hope that makes sense. You're going to have to put in more work on the front end. And it took me like 6 to 8 months of being very consistent with my mobility practice. And now I'm able to maintain it fairly easy. Once I got pregnant, I had 2 babies. I had to kind of relearn because my hips were stuck and I was very sedentary for a while. Like I had to relearn it. But again, now I'm able to access that. I just maintain it. So it becomes easier and easier. The other piece that I wanted to touch on is myofascial release. So you can go, I have this, we're in Delaware. I have a woman who is wonderful. She's a myofascial release massage specialist. But you can do self myofascial release, which is the fascia is your tissue between your muscles and your skin, and it actually wraps around all of your organs. And it's all connected in our whole body. So my friend Emily, I share her videos with people a lot. She does workshops on this, Emily Shoup Yoga, if you're looking on YouTube. But she talks about how, because it's one big system, if you can do some myofascial release on one part of your body, it actually can help you in other parts of your body too, because it's all connected. So if your fascia is tight in one area, it could be pulling on your shoulder and you could be getting shoulder pain, even though the origin of it is maybe down by your hips, right? So the concept here is you can use a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball or a Theragun or a foam roller or whatever, and breathe while you sink into those tight spots to allow your fascia to say, oh, we can chill out, we can stretch a little bit and we're safe. And that will also allow you to access those deeper ranges when you then go to do your workouts. So I personally used to use a Theragun and foam rolling as a retroactive, I'm achy, so I better roll it out. Now, the smarter way to do this is to do it before your lifts, because then when you lift, you're able to get your shoulders all the way overhead in an overhead press. You're able to get your hips back further in a deadlift without your hamstrings pulling your back under, and all of those things. So do your myofascial release and your mobility before your lifts. Do them on your off days. Do them as much as you can until your body starts to feel good. Then you can just maintain with your lifts.
I definitely did too much of the, like you said, we're exposed in sports to like sit and do a butterfly stretch, reach and touch your toes, like not really understanding the premise behind it. And I think, something like squat specifically, I don't put as much emphasis on a specific warm up where, if I have a squat day, I might just do a couple of sets of like really light squats with like just the barbell or a lower rep or a lower weight. I prefer to do specific mobility routines because I kind of treat it too as like downtime, quiet time. It's like a whole separate thing, almost like yoga. So for me, it is a very like relaxing thing, and it absolutely can be. And you can kind of use it however you want to use it. And that's what really worked for me. And I am lucky in that I've always been pretty good in terms of like flexibility and mobility through something like a barbell squat or just those general movements. My hamstrings are probably tighter than anything. So those mobility routines, I treat a little bit differently. Foam rolling, that's something I started to incorporate, like while I watch TV, right? As just like extra release. But I agree that I used to do these like static stretches and did not realize that's not serving the purpose at all to use pre-movement, pre-workout. Fine post-workout or like separately, but your stretches should be more dynamic and more like actual moving through something. I don't know, like world's greatest stretch is like my go-to for a lot of things. That's like an actual like movement flow you could do. So little patterns like Jess said, like the pigeon or the 90-90. I struggle with like glute activation. So before I do something like a barbell squat, because I'm very quad dominant, I will do very slow with a squeeze, like hip thrusts from the floor, like body weight or a glute bridge, or I'll do single leg glute bridges, or I'll put a band on for like extra activation there. So things like that. Once you know your body and you know your limitations, you can do things that are more specific to that. My lats for a long time were super tight, so I had to be like very intentional about that. It's not an issue for me now. Mine is still to this day, and it's something that I can be better about, is like glute hamstring. I really have to be intentional with that warm up just because I'm so quad dominant. And I think a lot of females can be that way. I mean, I have like track in my history and cross country and soccer. It's just kind of how it worked out. And I also used to squat just to squat. And I didn't, when I used to like go to the gym and work out, I didn't, I just assume a leg day was a leg day, I guess is the best way to put it, where I wasn't intentional about the muscle groups that I was actually hitting. And I think I did myself a huge disservice during that period of life. And that's okay, because I didn't know any better. Now I do. But just wanted to throw that out in terms of like how I approach workouts. I also love using resistance bands to go through the same motion that I might be doing in my workout, like a lat pull down or band pull aparts, just anything to kind of warm up joints, shoulders, back, lats, those types of things. So yeah, that's kind of how I treat my mobility and my warm ups. All the same thing, obviously, just a little bit different flow, I guess, if you will.
I love that you added in there about like the muscle isolation of the things that you have a tough time connecting with, because that's also something I program quite a bit for clients. It's like most women tend to struggle with lower abdominal connection and glute connection. We tend to be using our backs and our quads way too much. So that's a really good
common one. People are like,
lats.
I want more abs in my program. And I'm like, no, you're doing a lot.
You need to learn to brace it. Right.
Yeah.
If we can learn to brace properly, then you're going to feel your abs from your squats and from your good mornings and stuff like that. No, I think that's a great point. If you guys aren't sure, if you're like, but what mobility do I do? Here, I'm going to tell you some free ones that you guys can follow on social media just to get started. So some of my favorites, Beard the Best You Can Be on Instagram. He's awesome. And sometimes, and he sells his own programs and stuff, but sometimes you can just look and he'll do like, okay, different cars, meaning like that's, I forget what it stands for, but it's to access your end range of motion in different joints, just for your hips or just for your ankles or just for your shoulder or whatever. He's great. Squat University on Instagram and YouTube. He is what am I thinking right now? He's a PT. And he's really good because he'll go through, okay, here's the best warm up to do for your squat. Here's the best warm up to do for your deadlift if your hips are tight, like whatever. And then Mind Pump has a mobility series that's free on YouTube where they kind of take a more general approach of like, okay, follow this 5-minute YouTube video before your lift and do it 3 times through. And we're going to hit the major joints. So all of those are really good. Physical therapist. My gosh, my brain is slow today. The Squat University guy, he's a physical therapist. So anyway, you can follow those 3. I think that they're pretty solid ones.
I have some other ones. The Barbell Physio is another good one.
Oh, yep.
He talks a lot about different injuries. And I found a new one. I don't know if I've even shared it with you because it doesn't look like you follow him. Might be my favorite account out of all of them now is Igor, IGOR.system. He's strictly a mobility coach. His videos are so good, so clear, so concise, and they're so specific to like one individual like thing that you're addressing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I went down a rabbit hole one night on his Instagram, and his stuff is really, really good. So I I love focusing on those types of things. It just feels good to be able to move better in that regard. I don't want to be 40 and I can't bend over to tie my freaking shoes, like something so simple. So yeah, those are some other ones I wanted to add that I love.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So when you are now structuring your workout, here's kind of the order that we would do. Get your blood flowing, do something, walk, go on an incline treadmill, walk for 5 minutes, do the elliptical, do a little bicycle, like recumbent bike, whatever, with some resistance, get your blood flowing for 5-ish minutes. Then do your mobility and or myofascial release specific to whatever's tight on you or specific to the movement you're doing that day. Like I might spend more time on my ankles and my shins and doing some maybe using the slant board before my squat days, right? Because I know that that's going to help with that. I might do more lat and shoulder work on a back day. So first do that stuff. Then when you go to do your big compound lifts, I tend to do 1 or 2 lighter sets before my hard working sets. I don't do this every single lift of the whole day, but I'll do it for my first lower body exercise and my first upper body exercise. So let's say I'm doing deadlifts and bench presses, and then I'm doing a bunch of other stuff. Just during my deadlifts and my bench presses, because my first lower and upper move, I'm going to do 1 or 2 lighter sets. If I do that and I feel like something's off or something's tight, I go back to step 2 and I do a little bit more mobility in those spots. And then I come back for my heavy sets. If I feel that something's off, I don't load as heavy as I do on a day where I'm like, yep, everything feels great. Let's just go right into it. And then we go into our hard working sets, our big compound lifts. Maybe we end with some accessory or muscle isolation type lifts, but that's kind of the order that I go into it with. And then again, you're going to see better physique change as a side effect also. And when you're training for function like this, you're always working, okay, can I get my rep a little bit better every single time, week over week, month over month? You're going to be able to lift heavier. You're going to have less pain. You're going to have less injury. And not just because you're practicing the movement pattern, but like you're also getting more out of that specific set. Like if I just sit on a leg extension machine to hit my quad, I'm only isolating that one muscle. So I'm getting more total working volume if I do a squat really well with heavy weight, because I'm having to work my quads and my glutes and my hamstrings a little and my core. So all these muscles are working together and it's actually more stress on my system in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I just had this conversation with a client recently about if she's like limited on time with her workouts. Like she's like, what do I do? Like I feel overwhelmed. Do I just not do the workout? And I kind of explained to her, like you said, with like compound lifts being the focus initially, like your first thing that you're doing in your workout. And we kind of go through this like order of priority in terms of like her workouts for the week. And also like, if I only have 30 minutes, like, what do I do? So we kind of went through like what that looked like, how to challenge herself with that weight. She asked about like warm up. Do I like, if I'm short on time, do I eliminate that? Or how do I go about that? And I think that's important in terms of like, the last thing you want to do is go into a workout rushing with only 30 minutes and saying, I'm skipping my warm up. I'm just going to do 5 heavy sets of squats. You're asking for trouble. You're asking for an injury, and you're going to be pissed when you only had 30 minutes and now you can't lift at all because you've injured yourself. So no, I don't think you should neglect mobility. But 1 to 2 lighter sets, like I mentioned, if that's what you can do, like that's good, that where you're doing something. You can't do nothing. You can't just go put 160 pounds on the squat bar or on the barbell or whatever it is on the rack and just think you can jump in. It's not going to feel good. It's also going to feel so hard without warming up at all too. Yeah. And then I talked to her about accessory lifts being like later on, and yes, they serve a purpose and yes, they're important. But if you are moving with a good range of motion and warming up correctly, and going through something like that, obviously this is like a little off topic in terms of like, we're not always like rushing through our lifts, but just kind of understanding the order of importance with the way that we're going through that flow. But I think I used to go into workouts thinking like, I need to get this over with and like check a box. That did me a huge disservice because I did neglect things like mobility through that. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. Like that can't be that important. And that's why I started to separate like an actual mobility routine so that I'm still super intentional, but maybe my warm-ups are a little bit shorter, but I will still do a 15 to 20 minute full body or specifically hip mobility routine or whatever it is that I'm working on 3 times a week, right? Like, so I think it's important to understand how much time I'm still putting into that. But I struggled with that mindset. And I think a lot of other people do too. It's like, I'm short on time. This is the thing that I neglect. Please don't neglect mobility for the sake of going through and checking a box.
Do less
Yeah.
accessory moves instead. Do less tricep isolation, bicep isolation, ab isolation, calf isolation. Cut that stuff out. If you do your mobility with intention, not just passively stretching, that's not going to help you. If you do your mobility with intention and then you do 3 or 4 sets of 2 big compound lifts, you're going to get more out of that than feeling like you have to check 10 boxes.
Just rushing through everything. Yeah. No, and that's exactly, I don't think I finished my thought, but that's exactly what I cut out. I haven't directly trained calves in I don't know how long. I do not directly train core unless I feel like I'm struggling with engagement. I'm not doing abs on the ab machine at the end of my workout. It's because I'm doing something to make sure that I'm connecting to that muscle and bracing properly in my lifts if I ever feel like I need to reconnect. But I do not train abs for the sake of like getting leaner in my midsection.
Yeah.
I love training arms, biceps, triceps. However, I also, like Jeff said, will cut that accessory out if I am short on time or kind of whatever like season of life I'm going through. But I love training arms, so trying to cut that out if I don't have to.
And again, I started incorporating more abs and like adduction postpartum because those are areas that I have a tough time mentally connecting with now, right? But it's for function, it's not for aesthetics.
Yep. And now from December to February, I'm going through this performance program, and for me to spend 12 full weeks not on aesthetics is very different for me to just strictly dedicate to this, but it's just a challenge and it's totally different. And it's funny, I was programming it for myself. My husband's looking at my workouts like, what are you doing? And I'm like, that's fine. You can talk shit. You're going to see me doing weird stuff in the gym and I do not care. So I'm excited to share some of what I'm doing in that. It's a mind pump program for anyone that wants to know the performance, kind of the performance advanced mostly. If anyone wants to like look it up and see what it is.
And I've done their regular performance program before, and what ends up happening, and a lot of it's still the basics. You're still doing some sort of squat variation, some sort of hinge variation, but they have you moving through different planes of motion or doing different dynamic lunges and things like that.
Types of things, or
What I ended up finding is then when I went back to my more typical lifting, I was so much stronger and more stable, and I was actually able to lift way heavier with more control. It kicked my butt in like the best kind of way.
Yeah, so it's actually like a strength focused, and then like there's like a whole speed and power section, and then the back end is like conditioning, where it's like very like high intensity, more cardio sprints. And God, if anyone saw my Instagram story as of this day, I went on and was like, I woke up and felt like running, and I just got on the treadmill as soon as I got out of bed, didn't even brush my teeth, and I was like, man, I just want to run. That is not a feeling that comes through this body often. So I think that's what I needed. I just need like a change up in my routine. And it doesn't mean I'm going to go sign up for Orange Theory or I'm going to go to Pilates to change it up. I'm just changing my goal. But I think always having a goal is super important. And this is going to be a really fun challenge. So this is a cool way to still set a goal and progress without just lifting heavy, checking a box, going through the motions. And it's going to like,
and feeling like it always has, it's not about physique. Like, and I think that those goals that's very clear. Like you have to know that that's the outcome you're looking for is performance and speed and those sorts of things. Because if somebody signs up for a program and says, well, I'm not seeing results in physique, it's like, well, I'm not doing this for physique. Right. So all of these modalities are all great for different reasons. Right.
And it's temporary. And I'm going to go back to training for physique after the 12 weeks. And again, it's not that I won't see improvements in my physique. It's just not what I'm focusing on. I'm not going into a calorie deficit. I don't know if I will do that next year, but I am strictly just going into this I'm fueling my body. I feel really good. I'm about to go through a detox protocol just to like hit the reset button and everything. And as soon as I finish that is when I'm jumping into this. So yeah, it's just to kind of give you an idea of like training for function or training for things and having goals other than just changing your physique can actually be really powerful for your physique. But it's also really important for your health, and please do not neglect moving your body.
If you get injured, you're going to be out of commission for way longer. So like prevent the injuries ahead of time by doing this stuff.
And also, to be super clear, final point to hit home is that we are not against machines in the gym. But if you're doing squats on something like a Smith machine or whatever it is,
leg press, only leg pressing, but not also learning to squat your whole body.
The balance part, if you're like, well, I struggle with balance or I struggle with this, great. That's something you really need to work on and is so critical to mobility and flexibility and improving that. And you can subject yourself to more injury by only going through planes of motion that are strict up and down like a Smith machine instead of letting your body move a little bit more how it wants to actually move. So if you're struggling with that in any way, it's super important to understand what the machines are there for and how to use them correctly in your programming versus, and I've been there in the gym where I'm new and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to go to the machines because it tells you what to do and whatever, right? I get that. But just want to be super clear that it's more beneficial to practice body weight and mobility and dumbbells and learning how to balance. If you feel like you can't reverse lunge or without holding on to something, great. Hold on to something until you get to that point and progress. But that's also going to be super important for mobility and effective programming for function and physique too. Good.
Sweet.
Hit it, huh?
I feel like that's kind of everything we want to cover. Don't skip the warm-ups, guys.
Yeah. All right. Till next time, guys. See you later.